But we're all friends, right?
I love Canada. She's wrong on the issues, but I really like her.
I hope people know that it is good-spirited, that we really do get along, and it's okay to passionately disagree.
That's absolutely right. All right, making America great again by passionately disagreeing. I love it. And then being friends in the break. That's what matters. Thanks to all of you. We are back here tomorrow at noon Eastern. And now, here is Harris.
We begin with this Fox News alert. President Trump speaking out for the first time in just the last hour on a very tense day amid all the uproar over his administration's zero-tolerance policy on immigration. The president and the administration's top law enforcement officials are not backing down. We go outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. The president and top officials responding to growing controversy now over an illegal immigration policy that involves separating children from parents who are suspected of illegally crossing our southern border. President Trump pointing the finger at Democrats, saying their refusal to negotiate over immigration policy has put America in this situation.
Immigration is the fault and all of the problems that we're having, because we cannot get them to sign legislation. We cannot get them even to the negotiating table. And I say it's very strongly the Democrats' fault. They're they're really obstructionist, and they are obstructing. The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. It won't be. You look at what's happening in Europe, you look at what's happening in other places. We can't allow that to happen to the United States.
Kevin Corke live at the White House for us with the latest. Kevin?
Harris, good afternoon. Kirstjen Nielsen, the Homeland Security Secretary, spelled it out quite frankly in plain language when she said there's no reason to sneak into this country. If you're seeking asylum, you have remedies of getting into this country the right way. She said if you're sneaking in, it's unlawful, first of all. And second of all, it skips the line ahead of people who did it the right way. To say nothing of the fact that if you're really seeking asylum, you can go to some port of entry and you can be processed there. Let me take you to Twitter. The president, of course, as you pointed out, weighing in on this, not just on the air earlier here on Fox News, but also online, saying this: children are being used by some of the worst criminals on earth as a means to enter our country. Has anyone been looking at crime taking place south of the border? It's historic. With some countries, the most dangerous places in the world. Not going to happen in the U.S. Now, that sentiment was obviously echoed repeatedly at this morning's National Sheriff's Convention over in New Orleans, Louisiana, most notably by Kirstjen Nielsen.
This department will no longer stand by and watch you attack law enforcement for enforcing the laws passed by Congress. We will not apologize for the job we do or for the job law enforcement does for doing the job that the American people expect us to do.
Unapologetic, to say the least. Now, later today, the president will meet with members of the Senate Appropriations Committee in an effort to get under some solid footing in his effort to fund that border wall that he promised America. Now, part of the argument made by proponents of the wall is just like the separation policy. It's a deterrent. That's basically what they're saying here in Washington in some corners, Harris. But some Democrats say that's simply playing politics with innocent victims.
So he's playing a game. As you were saying earlier, he knows this family separation policy is very unpopular. And what he's doing is try to point fingers at others and use it for leverage for a whole set of other immigration issues. But this one, family separation, is his doing, and he could end it today.
Chris Van Hollen, of course, of the state of Maryland. Don't forget, we have a press briefing scheduled for later on in this hour. Of course, we'll bring that to you live. But for now, back to you.
Kevin Corke, thank you very much. Reaction pouring in over what's happening there over the past few days. Former First Lady Laura Bush wrote in the Washington Post yesterday, quote, "I appreciate the need to enforce and protect our international boundaries, but this zero-tolerance policy is cruel. It is immoral, and it breaks my heart," end quote. Joining me now, Republican Congressman Dave Bratt of the great state of Virginia, a member of the Congressional Border Security Caucus, a perfect person to have on this day. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, I want to try to see if we can get real good, clear information on where the White House is in all of this, as you understand it moving forward.
Yeah, well, the White House has been clear along the way. They want their 4-pillar plan I prefer the Goodlatte plan because it has E-Verify. If you don't have E-Verify, we'll end up right back here in 5 years. But it's not on the Democrats, the politicization that's going on right now. The Democrats, we first of all offered to take rid of all kids, DACA, give them a pathway, right? 700,000 kids. Then Trump says 1.8 million. Then we have 25 Republicans that go offer to work with 200 Democrats to write a liberal/moderate bill.
What's happening? Why is this happening?
And what's happening? Where are the Democrats? They're no, no, no. So it's just like on tax cuts. Not one Democrat voted for tax cuts, and now the Atlanta Fed has us growing at over 4 next quarter. They're hurting. On this issue, they want to say, let's take care of the kids and family separation. We can do that tomorrow morning.
Sure.
If they show up to play ball and compromise, the Republicans, the Goodlatte bill is the compromise. And on E-Verify, just so people can go fact check all this, Senator Obama ran on that. And Bill Clinton ran on that. And Barbara Jordan, the great African-American civil rights leader, ran on all that. Only in the last year or so, when the Democrats have just gone all in on this identity politics, there's no rational policy. The Goodlatte bill is the rational policy that will solve the problem, so we don't have to go back to this. It's compassionate. It fixes the problem. And by the way, the rule of law matters. The folks that are coming here from Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, they do not have strong rule of law. That's why they're coming here. So the last thing we want to do is
part of why they're coming here. Yeah.
Right. And we don't want to copy London, Amsterdam, Paris, Germany, Italy. Go Google what's going on in Europe right now. It's not pleasant.
You know, Congressman, what you're talking about there is also what the president said just a short time ago. We covered it live. He said, this won't be refugee holding facility. We will not have what they have in Europe on my watch. It's echoing kind of what you're talking about. But this issue of what's happening on our southern border right now that's blowing up, that's getting people like Oprah Winfrey to put out stuff on her Twitter, which I'm asking, where the heck were all these people in 2014 when the pictures of the kids in the cages first came out? But all of that aside, what's happening is something that is separating families at the border. And the administration today seems to be putting out sparse messaging on that. We know it's happening because the Attorney General tried to use the Bible to defend it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the politics, the Democrats lose on the issue itself, right, on immigration. So they wave a shiny object by the day on whatever the topic of the day is. Don't look over there. Just do rational immigration policy. That's called the Goodlatte bill. The 4 pillars of Trump are good, but it's missing E-Verify. Without E-Verify, that ends the chain, right? If we pass a DACA, the moderate bill, we'll give amnesty to 2 million folks. Our folks in DHS and the secretary will confirm, they'll be working on processing those 2 to 3 million people full time. We won't have any officers left to do immigration border control. So the whole thing comes back. You announce to the world, and guess what happens? You're going to get another surge, and we'll be right back here in a few years doing this debate again.
Wow, Congressman, that really makes it simple. But both of these plans coming from Republicans have some amnesty in them. But the way that you spelled out that moderate, though, it really makes sense, because then the president also doesn't get what he wants. And he said, hey, it's about deal making. You got to get something to him to sign. Tell me about amnesty in the one that you think that he would sign. What does that look like?
Yeah, the Goodlatte bill specifies all the kids that have DACA confirmation, right? So it's not a guesswork, right? The Weekend bill has guesstimates based on prior amnesties. There's a handful, not enough to do good, science or whatever. But you're just making guesstimates, and then you're going to have tons of people who aren't qualified saying, hey, I got paperwork. Well, how many people from Guatemala and Honduras, et cetera, have paperwork? Very few. Everybody gets it in common sense, right? So the Goodlatte are the kids that signed up for that special status. That is an amnesty, but we're willing to compromise. The Republicans compromised on this, and there's plenty of other compromises. On E-Verify, we've made compromise for the agricultural workers, et cetera. And typically, people don't want to make compromises on that on the Republican side, but we've compromised like crazy. The Democrats are AWOL on everything. On 700,000 kids, 1.8 million. On the Democrat bill, we went to work with Steny and 200 Democrats, and now they won't even vote on their own bill. And so that
shows
you clearly what's going on. How did they go back to their
constituents, then the Democrats, and say that they walked away from the table this time? Do you think that this is as close as we'll get for a long time to getting something done? Do you think this is going to be, hopefully not, but potentially a missed opportunity for everybody, including Democrats?
Yeah, I hope it's not. We do need action to put an end to the chaos at the border. Just for example, one of my colleagues the other day, 43 million lethal doses of fentanyl came across the border in the last few months. Right? Let that sink in. 43 million lethal doses, right? And then you got human trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. We have to solve this. And the Democrats are nowhere, right? If you say, how many folks should we let in? They will not have an answer. What should we do on border security? No answer. So the press doesn't hold them accountable to answer the tough questions. I'm sitting here in the hot seat taking all the questions. Where's the Democrats? Nope, they're hiding behind glossies and TV ads and whatever. And, you know, they're not at the table making good legislation.
Well, look, you put something on the table for everybody. I heard that shout out to the media for us to do our jobs, too, and to really press in. I was on the Hill on Thursday talking about this issue with Walden and some others, just trying to get clarity on opioids and fentanyl and all that's out there. Congressman Bratt, a wealth of information. Thank you for breaking down those two immigration bills in such a specific way. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Hey, you do a great job. We all love you. Keep it up.
Thank you very much. All right. Fox News chief political anchor and executive editor of Special Report, Bret Baier, is here. Bret, there was a lot there. The president talking today, though, there seems to be this running around of the issue of whether or not they're separating families at the border. He certainly made it clear that it's happening. The AG did. Why is that even part of the argument right now?
I don't know. And it's not a winning argument, this whole back and forth and the images and the focus on this issue on immigration policy, because it's emotional and it's engaging all kinds of different people. It's engaging the Catholic Church is weighing in, and Laura Bush, former First Lady, is weighing in. And you've got all these folks that are weighing in on this policy. The president is putting the onus on Democrats to sit at the table and hammer out new immigration law. Chuck Schumer, just in the past few seconds, responding to the president, as everyone who has looked at this agrees this was done by the president, not Democrats. He can fix it tomorrow, Schumer says, if he wants to, and if he doesn't want to, he should own up to the fact that he's doing it. So you get this back and forth, as we often see in Washington. The bottom line is both are accurate. One, you could do a piece of immigration legislation that collectively solves a lot of things, including this issue. But two, the president could pick up the phone and change the policy if he so wanted to.
So what are you hearing from the White House about why he doesn't do that?
Well, I think it's a part of a broader plan. I mean, I haven't talked to anybody specifically about their legislative strategy, but they're trying to get Democrats to sit at the table and hammer out this funding. They have the border wall funding issue that is coming up in the funding bills as you head into the fall.
Yes.
The president's meeting with Senators Shelby and Capito today to talk about that very issue. And I think that is all part of this strategy. But the PR part of it is not a winning strategy currently.
Well, the reason I ask why the president wouldn't move forth on his own on this and pick up the phone and change the policy is because that really makes Democrats look politically impotent. They shut the government down over the issue of DACA. I mean, that's what Chuck Schumer did. And it's odd moving forward that they wouldn't at least come to the table at this point to say, well, we tried.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And the issue of DACA is huge, and it will be something that probably Democrats are hoping to run on in the fall. That's, you know, if they could potentially solve it, maybe they would. The separate issue of separating families, I think that you're hearing different things from different people in the administration, whether it's happening, whether it's not, how they're being treated, how they're not being treated.
Sure.
And that's where they have to sing from the same sheet of music.
Yeah, all right. So the AG Sessions today said this. We want to take a look at this. It's a loophole, a migrant children loophole, and then I want to talk with you about this, Bret.
Word got out about this loophole, and the results were predictable. The number of aliens illegally crossing with children went from 14,000 to 75,000 in just 4 years, a 5-fold increase. This cannot continue.
Bret, your reaction?
Well, I think both the Attorney General and Secretary Nielsen said today that there are more and more illegal immigrants using children to make the case that they should get through into residency inside the U.S. And both of them in their speeches made that very case, saying that children are being used at the border as tools in this loophole of policy so that they could say that they are one family unit. And they have multiple explanations about people using different children that are outside their family.
Why is this important? What's the significance for the conversation?
The emotion of this is tough to analytically get beyond. When you see the picture of the crying, separated child, it is emotional for people, and it has an effect in how they feel about it. So, yes, everybody wants a strong border. I think if you ask people, they say, yes, security along the border is key, but this emotional issue plays across the board.
Well, the president said they could move very, very quickly. And as you have pointed out, he could move even faster than that. And boy, that would really leave Democrats in a pickle. But we'll see what happens. Always glad to have you on the program. Happy belated Father's Day.
Thank you, Harris.
I saw your pictures on Instagram with those two beautiful
Had a great
boys.
day.
I'm so glad you did. Good to see you.
Thanks.
All eyes on Capitol Hill. FBI Director Christopher Wray, DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz gearing up to testify publicly before the Senate Judiciary Committee. That is coming up in the next little while. We'll talk about what, though, happens before then, what we can expect, the reporting on the issue coming up. And two top GOP lawmakers ramping up pressure on the Justice Department. Hand over documents on the Russia probe now to their on Capitol Hill. It's going to come from the Inspector General Michael Horowitz and FBI Director Christopher Wray. They are set to go before the Senate Judiciary Committee over that report on the Clinton email investigation shortly. As you know, that IG report exposed more anti-Trump text messages between FBI official Peter Strzok and attorney Lisa Page. They were having an affair. Now Strzok says he's willing to testify before Congress. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge now with more on this as the story develops today on Capitol Hill. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Harris. We're here on Capitol Hill, and the hearing room is just behind me. We're expecting that to begin about 45 minutes from now, and it will be the first time that we've heard from the Inspector General Michael E. Horowitz, at least publicly, and we expect him to defend the findings in his 568-page report that found that former FBI Director James Comey was insubordinate, but significantly, Horowitz said there was no testimonial or documentary evidence that showed political bias at the FBI directly impacted investigative decisions during the Clinton email case. Now, along with Horowitz, we're also going to have the current FBI Director Christopher Wray, and we expect him to defend the credibility of the Bureau and to make the case over how the Bureau will regain the public's trust. So let me just run through what we're expecting just an hour from now. We'll have opening statements from the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley. That will go for about 15 minutes. And then also the ranking Democrat. Then we'll have opening statements from Horowitz as well as Wray, and then we'll get into several rounds of questionings. A leading legal expert told Fox News earlier that they believe this issue of political bias at the Bureau will dominate.
I think part of the sort of narrative that's going to play out in this hearing is to get Horowitz to explain the difference between not finding bias and not finding actions caused by bias. I think that what Horowitz said in the report is that there was bias, but he didn't have any documents or no one fessed up to taking actions due to that bias. And that is a critical distinction. He refused to make an assumption that these actions were taken for the wrong reason.
The Inspector General's report uncovered new text messages between FBI agent Peter Strzok and FBI lawyer Lisa Page that indicated anti-Trump bias. And as you mentioned, Harris, Peter Strzok has indicated to the House Judiciary Committee that he is willing to come up here and testify under oath without any kind of immunity deal. And his lawyer told the Washington Post he believes his client, his statements have been misrepresented and his actions at the FBI caricatured or misunderstood, so they hope to clarify that. But it's not clear to me, Harris, and I think this is the critical question for that House committee, whether they will do it in public because Strzok is not asking for any kind of immunity here, or whether it will also be behind closed doors.
Yeah. All right. Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's bring in Congressman Lee Zeldin, Republican from New York. He introduced a House resolution detailing alleged misconduct at the FBI and DOJ and calling for a special counsel to look into the FBI's handling of the Clinton email investigation. Great to see you, since all of this has been breaking news. So what we did learn about this was that there potentially was special treatment for Hillary Clinton. And even though the report says that some of that bias or special treatment was not political, what is the fallout of that? What is the headline in that?
There's increased transparency. So in our resolution, House Resolution 907, which is now up to 32 members of Congress co-sponsoring, it details misconduct related to FISA abuse, how and why the Hillary Clinton email probe ended, how the Trump-Russia probe began, misconduct at the highest levels of the DOJ and the FBI. What you see in the IG's report is a lot more detail of what might be one paragraph of one of my resolution. The Inspector General did really good work, doing a lot of interviews, bringing in a lot of documents. We see a lot of the text messages. Anyone who wants to form a conclusion there is no political bias, they just haven't read the document yet. What else is interesting about the IG's report is, if you fast forward to page, I think it was 430 of this several hundred page report, what many others in the media aren't talking about, is all the leaks. You could look at attachments G and H, and it has the reporters with all sorts of different FBI employees talking to that singular reporter. Page 430 not only talks about there being so many leaks the IG couldn't even figure out how to get to the very bottom of it, but on top of that, it talks about FBI agents having free tickets to sporting events and golf outings with FBI employees.
Yeah, let me slow you down for just a second, because what you're saying is that this really peeled back the curtain on some other untoward things that were happening. And do they fit into bias, or do they sit alone?
I think the leaking issue is one that goes well beyond the decision to end the Hillary Clinton email probe, or well beyond the decision to start the Trump-Russia probe. And I think when they investigate more deeply as far as those leaks and what they were getting in return, I think it's going to involve cases well beyond just what we're talking about here, which was the scope solely of this IG's report of actions taken before the 2016 election. I think the leaking is a bigger issue.
I don't know if anybody has called this out. I'm going to call it out. So it's not just that other people looked at this report and said that there was no bias. The report indicated that it wasn't for political bias. What James Comey and members of his team were doing, those texting members about how they were going to keep President Trump from becoming president, then candidate. You've got one calling Trump supporters, quote unquote, retarded, and the circle widened beyond Strzok and Page and all of that. It isn't anybody's overlay on what they thought in reading it. Those are the things that the report found. Why didn't the report find bias based on everything that's in there?
I think that there are conclusions that we see in the text. I don't know, it's page 420 or 421, where it talks about how Peter Strzok was prioritizing the Russia investigation over the Hillary Clinton email probe.
Yes.
So obviously the IG's report is filled with facts, and the IG, if you read deep into the several hundred page report, you'll see some conclusions being made. Peter Strzok clearly was in a position where his bias was overcoming his better objectivity.
Congressman, does anybody lose their job behind this at the FBI or the DOJ?
Some already have. We have seen
but
people
since this report has come out, do you think more will come?
Peter Strzok should not be working in any corner of the FBI. He should not be a water boy, a coffee boy. He shouldn't be a janitor. He should not be in the building. He's still collecting a salary. How is Peter Strzok
Does he have a security clearance, is what Rand Paul and others have wanted to know?
I would bet that he does, and he's not alone. There are others. As well. So there's been a lot more transparency. Now's the point where we really need a lot more accountability too.
Very exciting to hear from the man who wrote the report coming up. I know you'll be perched. Congressman Zeldin, always great to see you.
Great to see you as well.
Thank you. Some top House lawmakers warning the Justice Department they will take action this week if the DOJ fails to comply with a subpoena, seeking documents on the investigation surrounding the 2016 election. We'll talk with a former DOJ turn over documents to Congress. House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy is warning the DOJ that lawmakers will be taking action this week if the DOJ fails to comply with a subpoena. That subpoena is seeking documents surrounding the 2016 election. Chairman Gowdy is suggesting lawmakers could move to hold DOJ officials in contempt of Congress. Watch.
We're going to get compliance, or the House of Representatives is going to use its full arsenal of constitutional weapons to gain compliance. This is too important. It was too important before the IG report. The IG report has even heightened the need for us to understand what happened in 2016.
House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes also vowing that lawmakers will not back down.
Documents do not begin to be turned over tomorrow, and a clear way and path forward for everything else is not clear here in the next couple days. There's going to be hell to pay by Wednesday morning.
Officials from the DOJ and FBI so far have not had immediate comment. We've reached out. We'll tell you when they do comment. Robert Driscoll, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. So next to an official comment is somebody who actually used to be at the DOJ, and it's always great to have you on the program, Robert. Let's start with who wins this battle, because I completely understand that Congress has oversight. I also completely understand that the FBI and DOJ have a right and a responsibility to protect sensitive information. So who wins?
I don't think anyone wins. I think it'll be a negotiated resolution. These things almost always are. It's a conflict of two valid principles. And one of the things that happens in these intra-branch disputes is that there is no really governing law, so to speak, on it. And so precedent means a lot. And so everybody is worried that if they give up an inch on this matter, it will be used against them the next time they request something. So I think that, they'll have to eventually negotiate a resolution. And both sides, frankly, come at this with a little bit unclean. Congress has had some issues with leaking. DOJ's had some issues with, it certainly appears, maybe overly redacting some documents that have been produced. When the redactions have been removed, sometimes you look at them and say, boy, I'm not sure why that was redacted in the first place. So I think there's a lack of trust on both sides. But eventually they'll just have to get everyone in a room and have the documents either reviewed or reviewed by a small group and get it done. I don't think anyone wants us to go to a contempt case or a court
By the way,
hearing.
what happens in a contempt of Congress case? I mean, is there punishment or something?
Nothing. Well, there's Eric Holder was held in contempt and nothing happened because, of course, the only branch of government that can prosecute under a contempt order is the executive branch, which is controlled by the president. So there could be a referral to the Department of Justice, and the U.S. Attorney in D.C. would not prosecute their own DOJ. And
you don't think that it would happen here either?
No, I would doubt it highly. I think there might be a court case where they could have the House counsel or someone bring the case, a civil matter. But I doubt a contempt would have much effect. I mean, I don't think former Attorney General Holder has necessarily been stunned or slowed down by being the first Attorney General held in contempt. But I don't think this will go that far. I think there's just frustration level from Congress about getting access to these documents.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is that it was really an attempt at shaming with Holder, and that really didn't accomplish anything either. I want to press in with this idea that you say neither side has totally clean hands. You were mentioning that Congress has leaked documents and information.
Right. Right. I mean, if you look at it, and I know this is the House, but if you look at the Senate side with the indictment of Jim Wolf, the security head for the Senate Intel Committee recently, that appears to at least to be some credible evidence or allegation that there was leaking on that side. And I think that people have always been concerned about leaks from, some folks involved in the House Intelligence Committee. So, I mean, I think that's one reason why DOJ is reluctant sometimes to handle sensitive documents. But similarly, DOJ, there was the email, I think you recall, the $70,000 conference table mentioned where the price of the conference table was redacted. And that's just embarrassing information. That's not any, sensitive high-level sources and methods. Sure. And so I think both sides are very skeptical about trusting the other, when in a situation like this, you really do need trust that if DOJ is holding something back, it's really only sources and methods or something very confidential.
It's all damaged integrity. It's something you and I have talked about time and time again, Robert, about how nobody trusts anybody because nobody's acting with integrity. There's not even like an incentive to do that anymore, it seems.
Right.
Great to see you. Thank you for being on the program.
Thanks for having me again, Harris.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling out President Trump over his summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Senator Schumer says the president is a weaker negotiator than President Obama. Watch.
I opposed the Iran agreement because I thought it wasn't strong enough. Well, it seems what we're doing with North Korea is even weaker than what Obama did with Iran.
Now,
so far, we'll see what happens. But the beginnings are not auspicious.
Let's bring in Army Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, former counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney and author of Warrior Diplomat. First of all, thank you for being on the program. And
Thanks,
second of
Harris.
all, I want to know your thoughts just in reaction to what you just heard.
Well, President Trump's critics can't have it both ways. On the one hand, last fall, he was a warmonger. He's driving us towards Armageddon and nuclear war, too bombastic. And now that he is effectively, through sanctions and through maximum pressure, driven us to these talks, now it's, well, he's naive and he gave up too much and he shouldn't have had the meeting. I mean, the President of the United States just can't win with these guys.
I want to talk about what's at stake, and so different, because you have Senator Schumer and others have compared the Iran situation to the North Korea situation. But militarily, and that's your background, when it comes to the military, what is at stake with both these nations and what's different?
Well, it's incredibly different. It's not apples to apples. On the one hand, you have an incredibly heightened, situation in the sense of both sides are heavily militarized on either side of the DMZ in North Korea. You do have the prospect of a major war. You do have Seoul literally under the gun of thousands of artillery pieces. But diplomatically, the Obama administration essentially did nothing and kicked the can down the road. So, North Korea, the bottom line is North Korea actually has a program that is capable of threatening the United States. That's a very different negotiation than Iran, which does not have a program yet, and where we're trying to keep them from having a program, and yet the Obama administration just essentially sold out the farm there on a bunch of promises, and then we can't even inspect the sites that are most likely to develop the program, which are the Iranian military sites. So it's just it's not apples to apples, despite what the president's critics are trying to make it seem to be.
Well, and Colonel, what I've also had curiosity about is how you keep the sanctions in place, or why you would want to, because I know you really are supportive of that for North Korea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, the key here is keeping, our foot on the neck of the North Korean economy. That is their Achilles heel, and I believe that's ultimately why they came to the table. And the president has made it clear, Secretary Pompeo has made it clear that the sanctions will stay in place. I served in the White House under Vice President Cheney and saw he was very frustrated when we gave concessions as the North Koreans gave concessions. I think the Trump administration is going to have a tough task in keeping the South Koreans and keeping the Chinese on the same page with us as the North Koreans try to drive a wedge. They're going to try to give up a little bit and gain some concessions from different actors, even if President Trump and Secretary Pompeo stand firm. So that's one piece that I'm really looking at. The other, Harris, very quickly, is cyber. And, we can't enter in a situation where we reduce one threat to the United States, and that's key. We should be focused on the nuclear threat. Meanwhile, the North Korean cyber capability is very sophisticated. They're very aggressive, and we need to make sure that's included as well.
Wow, we need to bring you back on another day to talk about that component. That is fresh, and we know how risky it can be in terms of our infrastructure, our energy, all of that.
And they're very active.
Oh, I know, they're poking at the bear.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out where to hit them. Colonel Waltz, thank you very much. We'll bring you back.
Thanks, Harris. All righty.
President Trump blaming Democrats for refusing to fix immigration laws. It was live on Outnumbered a short time ago. It's all amid the growing controversy over the treatment of children whose parents brought them across the border illegally. The president speaking on it for the first